Assalamu alaikum. This is Professor Aminah Al-deen for Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV. I've been away for a minute and I come back to some astounding and also heartbreaking news, which I decided to discuss this afternoon with three honorable and far more informed guests than myself. First of all, we have Dr. Denise Berte, who is the Executive Director of Peaceful Families Project. She is a licensed doctoral clinical psychologist, and I won't say with how many years' experience because I don't want to date her, in forensic psychology and trauma, which includes domestic violence and international issues related to mental health, which is also a part of the domestic violence platform, and war and refugees, which all of these things that Dr. Denise does contribute to what we're going to speak about this evening. Welcome again. I've talked to you before, and you had that beautiful smile on then too. So I am doing great here. Second, we have Mona Kafeel, and she serves as the Chief Operating Officer at Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, an educational, philanthropic, and social service nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering women and their families. And let me also welcome you this evening. Haven't met you before, but you're now on my Rolodex, and I will be talking to you often.
Thank you.
Third, but not least, is Nadiah Mohajir. She is a co-founder and executive director of Hurt Women and Girls. Nadiah is a lifelong Chicagoan, Pakistani American Muslim, mother of three, public health professional, reproductive justice activist, and anti sexual assault advocate. Let me just say, if the young women out there listening ever wanted to know who they could be when they grow up, these three women are here to guide you along the way. And I'm just so thrilled to have you for both a sensitive but an important conversation. I have to admit that when oh goodness, read the news, saw the video, or at least the picture, traditional of this woman in this beautiful dress. Miss Khan is in her wedding outfit. The makeup is perfect. Everything is looking delicious. And I thought of those South Asian weddings I've been to. I, of course, was interested mostly in the henna and the food, but oftentimes what lies under, especially as Muslim women move to realize their potential in the world, their potential contributions to the world, their potential contributions to communities and family, culture and communities rise to, I don't even want to call it an obstacle because it's more than an obstacle. So let's start here. Your organizations do the really heartbreaking and difficult work of helping all of us not only know but figure out what we can do, and in many ways, and I don't know if you know each other. If you don't, say hi to each other. um, um, Come together to see what are the resources, but also to form a community of women, some in the issue, but others outside of the issue, like coaches and advisors, etc. So let me ask, doesn't matter to me who answers, who wants to explain some of the nuts and bolts of Pakistani culture where things like thwarting a woman's move to advance herself, but also maybe she's knocking up against some norms. Who wants to take that on? Okay,
Right.
no, I don't.
I want to say something first because unfortunately, we know that Sister Sania, who you've talked about, is actually one of four murder-suicides in the past 6 weeks.
Now you're really breaking my heart. We're going to have to do part 2 to this program.
Right. So,
it's so important.
Right. And I think part of it is to realize that it's not just because we like to point fingers, right? We like to say, oh, it's that culture, or it's that issue, or it's this religion. And when we look at these, and we're talking about 10 bodies, right? We're talking about 10 lives lost in these 4 incidents, including one in Hawaii only a few days ago again. And when we look at it, there's nothing about the victims, right? So, and we've talked about this, some of the victims are new immigrants, some of them are not. Some of them wear hijab, some of them don't. Some are educated, some are not. Some are more strict practicing, some are not. One was divorced, or 2 were divorced. One was separated. One was not even looking to end the marriage, right? Some had children, some did not. I think what we need to talk about is not one particular culture, but what are we talking about to potential perpetrators? What is going on in our community? Because they are not all from one ethnic community as Muslims, but these are all Muslim men. So, and they are all practicing Muslim men. What is it that we're talking about? What is it that's going on in our community that is causing this? Because it isn't about the victims anymore. The victims are run the entire range. So we need to, and we've talked a lot about how do we protect victims and what would be different. Some of the victims had family support, some didn't. It didn't make a difference. And what we really need to look at is this sort of bigger conversation within our community, which is what are we saying to our brothers? Because as much as we like to talk about male victims, yes, but when it comes to domestic homicide, it is 100% male perpetrators, female victims, and at this point, 80% of the cases a firearm. And we really need to look at those issues as well as some of the cultural issues as well.
Okay, Mona and Nadiah, you don't get off the hook. Jump in. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. That was a great start, Dr. Berte. And I would love to add to that. I agree with you. It's not, domestic violence and intimate partner violence knows no culture, knows no religion. I think to your point about it's not about the victims anymore. I think what we have to really think about is, violence, as much as we'd like to believe that violence is about one bad guy or one bad apple, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So to your point about, what messages are we sending men? What messages are we sending communities, right? About marriage and divorce and leave-in and what it means to safely leave a marriage. These are all root causes of violence. So, it doesn't just happen that one day somebody wakes up and, commits murder suicide, right? There's a lot of little things that happen over the course of time, whether we're talking days or weeks or months or years, that lead up to this very horrifying and devastating act. And that's where the work happens well before that, right? And that's actually the harder work because it requires all of us as a community to hold our brothers and our fathers and our even our sisters, our sisters, our mothers, everyone accountable for the ways in which they do or do not show up for when, against violence, whether or not they speak up when they see something, whether or not they are creating spaces that are safe for victims to disclose, whether or not we are, having hard conversations with men when they make comments, silly jokes about objectifying women, or, owning women or whatever. Like, how much are we disrupting that? And even in our mosques, sometimes that happens. A lot of times that happens, actually, where an imam might, have a khutbah that is victim blaming, or that is, you know, um, talking about like gender roles in a way that could be misused to perpetrate violence, right? And so I think we have to start disrupting this kind of violence well before it gets to the point where it's horrifying.
Nadiah. That's Nadiah Mona.
Yes.
Sister Mona.
So I absolutely agree with Dr. Berte and Nadiah. We are all working along the same lines. So what I would like to add definitely is not only it happens in a place where people feel not comfortable. For example, the mosques, even within our families, the first generation immigrants, or even if they are not first generation immigrants, just the culture piece, and then not talking about the hard issues. And I feel that apart from going into our mosques, we also have to address the issue of mental health also plays an important part, where our community is not ready to have a conversation about it. We are not ready to accept. We are still, as a community, we are in that denial phase. We will make sure that we assign it to black magic, evil eye, or whatever. And to what Nadia is saying, holding not only men, holding women accountable. So many times we've seen mother-in-laws, sister-in-laws. And one thing that I tell everyone, we are the ones raising our sons. When they grow up and we say it's men's issue, no. How do we work on prevention? This is our work, because intervention can only go so far. We can have 5, 10, 15, 50 shelters. Till we go back to the root and work on prevention, there is no end to it. And domestic violence has an intersection of gun violence, mental health, um, cultural issues. So it is an intersection of many issues. So it's not a single issue that we can say, here, let's put a blame there. I mean, we have, as women, we really have to take that ownership that we are raising sons. How are we raising sons, and how do we raise daughters? So we'd have to take ownership of raising our sons the right way.
Okay, I want to take a maybe 2-minute break here, because I'm going to come back and dive deeply into the information that you've given. It might even make you uncomfortable, but I'm going to dive deep anyway, because you all have just convinced me that this topic needs at least 2 shows. We need to do the mental health part. We need to do preventative stuff, and we need to do possible solutions, which we're not going to get all done tonight, except in a surface kind of way. So let's take a minute or two. This is Professor Aminah Al-deen on Critical Talk for Muslim Network TV, talking about the issue of domestic violence and all the other issues surrounding it. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum. This is Professor Aminah Al-deen for Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV. And tonight we're talking about domestic violence and all of the issues that come around it, because they are almost as important, if not more important, in some instances than the acts themselves. I have with me a stellar group of women: Dr. Denise Berte, Mona Kafeel, and Nadiah Mohajir, who are just giving me some interesting parameters to think about. Let me take first, and I know the go-to is it happens in all communities. It happens in all religious communities. I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in Muslims. Okay? And inside of our communities, of which there are 87 of us, believe it or not, here in the United States, we have different kinds of domestic violence. There's the emotional, the physical, the spiritual. All of it is always accompanied by surveillance, especially of women, what they wear, what they're doing, what jobs they're involved in, X, Y, and Z. So I want to go there first. Women who practice Islam are Muslim. Does that mean somehow that the other aspects of their lives are jettisoned to the trash can? I mean, are they not also where is this permission for another adult practicing Muslim to both practice Islam, be a doctor, a lawyer, a journalist, a photographer, a university professor, like you ladies, very involved in organizations, come from? Didn't she grow up? Why is the woman, there's an expectation that the woman is still seeking permission? She's not a child. School me.
Can I go first?
Of course.
One thing that I see over and over again, majority of the time, not all the time, majority of the time, that parents do not encourage the girls to develop critical thinking. They want the daughters to just listen to them and then get married and off to husband, not bothered about, okay, they are considered a responsibility, someone they have to get rid of once they're married. So the critical thinking for a lot of these women is absolutely not developed. So when they move, and I've heard again and again, I was at my parents' home. I listened to what my parents were telling me. Then I moved to my husband, and he was telling me what to do. Now I don't know what to do with my life. I really have no idea. So this is again and again and again parents not wanting or ready to hear a no from their girls. So this is one group of women that I have seen that come through our doors. And of course there are many women in all shapes and sizes and different kind of parenting. So I'm speaking to someone a group that I've seen again and again.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd add to that, to what Mona said about, the parents kind of setting the tone. And that is that, and I have two daughters and I have a son. My one daughter is about to go to college. And one of the things that we're talking about a lot right now is identifying who your safe people are in your life, right? And by safe people, I mean people, trusted people, whether they're her age or whether they're older than her elders, who she can trust in a moment of crisis, and be received in a way that is free of judgment, free of blame, and where her safety is the most, like, the highest priority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is a discussion that many parents are scared to have with their children, because they don't even want, they're in denial about the fact that their children may even be in those circumstances, whether it is by choice or by coercion, right? Either way, they don't want to admit that. And so I think we, going back to what I said earlier, I just don't think we have enough safe people in our communities where people feel comfortable in seeking help, asking questions, even if they don't want to leave a situation. Simply asking a question is not an accessible thing, right? Whether you're asking an elder, like an aunt or a mom or a teacher, or whether you are, wanting to navigate, the many social services that we have, oftentimes they don't feel accessible to a lot of the communities that we work with. Within Muslim communities, it's because we're worried about shame and blame and stigma, and outside of Muslim communities, the mainstream social services, they have a one size fits all, like, sort of approach. They tokenize us, they exotify us, they are condescending towards us, and the first thing they want to do is call law enforcement. And we're people of color, and we're Muslims are living in a time where they're extremely surveilled and all of that stuff. And so there's a lot of mistrust that's happening. And so a lot of times what happens is people who are experiencing violence end up having to navigate it in a way that they feel just utterly alone, without any resources at their disposal.
And if I could, I'll add a couple of things onto the sort of amazing examples that we've been given. And what I want to talk about is this difference and this confusion between culture and the faith tradition of Islam, right? So unfortunately, a lot of our Muslim communities have swallowed the message of the cultures which were, shaped by colonial kinds of relationships that were, drenched in hierarchy and misogyny and all sorts of things like that. And they forgot that Islam was the voice of the vulnerable. Islam was the voice of equity for women. Islam was the voice saying marriage is to create peaceful places so that Muslims can grow and can be safe to do the battles they have to do against the rest of bad practice, right? So this idea that not only the outside, because we do have this sort of media campaign explaining that Muslim women are, powerless, and we are oppressing ourselves by covering, and that, it's part of our deen, this idea of violence. So that not only has affected outside people and how they manage cases of domestic violence within the Muslim community when they see them, but also, unfortunately, within our own communities where people really believe that this is what Islam is. And do not go back to our text. The texts are so clear. The Hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was an amazing example of positive, equitable, relationships with mutual consultation. We have clear commands within the Quran. We do not, you do not raise your hand against another Muslim. When you see oppression, you fight oppression with your hand, with your mouth, with your mind. You do not accept this. Believers, men and women, you are made from the same spirit. It's in and out and all over our sacred texts. But the cultural translation of that has become something else, has become something that Islam never was. And I think we need to address that. And when we look at prevention and we look at what to do, the idea is that we don't move away from Islam, but we move closer into Islam. And we remember what our sort of revolutionary history was in terms of the protection of women and vulnerable populations.
Well, let me play the angel's advocate here, and say our prophet, another man, had to get a whole set of stuff revealed because he broke away from those norms, those ideals that you're so often putting out there. And I think one of the things is that we don't read our text, any of them, honestly. I mean, we want the Prophet Muhammad to be like God, or at least his right hand, and so perfect there's no flaws. So the human side of him and how that is adjudicated in the text, we overlook. So one solution that is there, one, sure, you slipped here and you can do this, that, and the other, is overlooked in view of perfection. On the other hand, where usually I've found, this is just an Aminism, that Muslim women, doesn't matter if they're native to the United States or native to somewhere else in ancestry, what has happened is they play the role that others subscribe and ascribe to us. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, when I lived in Chicago, I worked with Hamdard, and it was a real fight to get Hamdard to work with Muslim women because they're saying, we don't want all that crap. We got enough Hindu crap here. And I'm saying, I really don't want either one, but, the women have to have a place to go. But the Muslim women came in giving the address of the safe houses, giving all the information out to everybody on the planet, destroying their own safety. We've been to court with women who will tell a judge that the Quran says he can beat me. And I'm saying, in which damn language are you reading? And they'll say, well, the woman who led the Doris said so also. You see? So we have these conflicting things. And then when other researchers, anthropologists, and sociologists, even some psychologists, go to report on them, we say, oh, no, they're biased against Muslims. How does that work? Even when you're trying to be an honest reporter and report what you see and what you hear. I'm digging. And remember, I'm the angel's advocate. Don't make faces at me. Our perception out there in the world is so-and-so set fire to so-and-so, such and such got gang raped. Girls are not permitted to go to school in the 21st century. And even in Chicago today, teaching at DePaul University for far too long, I ran into many young Muslim women who the thing was, well, whether you really get an education or not is not as important as we have somewhere to put you until we can get you married. Mm-hmm. And the girls buying it. Girls who decided to step outside of their ethnic group to get married and were faced with, elimination from a family. The other students hear this. Do you see what I'm saying? So that is their picture. I've even listened to the women who cover their heads with a kimar downplaying the women who don't. And I'm saying there's a whole world of Muslims out there who have been through many social, political, and economic scenarios where families are culturally Muslim. Some have been fighting to practice Islam against all kinds of odds. All kinds of things are happening. But if we own none of it, how are we going to move from point A to B? How do we, if the women speak up, if they do find a safe friend, And the safe friend, I've had that happen too, goes and tells everybody what's being told to her because the pressure on being on the in crowd, our dad says, you must tell me what she's saying, or mom says, or that aunt must, how do we mitigate any of this?
Yeah, I think you're identifying some really deep systemic issues, right? And I think most simply what I'll say is that, our faith, I truly believe that our faith is the core of our faith is Rahman, which is compassion. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times the ways in which we interact with each other within Muslim communities is a function of lacking compassion. And so your examples of, women who wear the hijab shaming women who don't, or, things like that. Like, I think we have in our pressure to practice a certain type of Islam, we have forgotten that Islam actually, most things in Islam have many ways to look at the same issue. And there are, like, the diversity of Islam is what makes it most beautiful. And the fact that, Muslims can and do practice in so many different ways. And I really think that lack of compassion that we have for each other, because my way is better than Mona's way, which is better than Denise's way, right? Like, that actually creates this unsafe person and this unsafe community, so that when people do feel like they have to reach out for help and say, this happened to me, I was assaulted yesterday, they are afraid that the first thing they're going to hear was, well, why weren't you wearing hijab? Or what were you wearing when that happened? Of course that happened to you, right? That is what is the number, like the first.
But wearing something, and it's really in the Quran, Akimar, but wearing it has not stopped the assaults on Muslim women.
Absolutely, but people don't see it that way. Like, there's this misinformation that wearing hijab, not dating, not ever being alone with a man is all of a sudden going to stop sexual assault, intimate partner violence, all of that stuff, right? Like, there's just this misinformation out there and this denial. People don't want to admit that, like, sexual assault happens with, fathers and sons and brothers and cousins as well, just as much as it happens with romantic partners.
Exactly.
The piece of denial also, and this is one of the things that we've decided in the midst of this sort of horrific 8 weeks that we've had, is the need to talk about it, right? So something that happens when we try to talk about intimate partner violence, when we try to talk about sexual violence, is we're told, like, no, not in the mosque, not in this community, not in that community, keep it positive. And the sort of the horrific beauty of the past 8 weeks has been, we have no choice but to talk about it. We have no choice but to talk about the actuality of what domestic violence ends up being. So one of the things that Peaceful Families, along with Menavdi and Texas Sister Mona's organization, as well as others, is to really, now it's time to unearth. So if we think about where social change comes from, if we look, borrowing a page from Black Lives Matters, that when we hear the names, when we hear those stories, we can no longer close our eyes. And this is the campaign, the national campaign that we are starting and working with, which is called In Their Names. And it really has 3 functions. One is to document. We need information about domestic homicide in Muslim communities. Now, I understand, because we're all terrified, because there's Islamophobia, because this can be weaponized against us, that we don't want to talk about it. But we have 10 dead bodies in 8 weeks. We need to talk about it. So the first thing that we did is to create a data collection form, so that we look at the incidents, we look at the victims, we look at perpetrators, we look at community response. We need information about what happens when there are not survivors. And in all of these cases, there have been no survivors, not perpetrators, not victims. Nobody has survived. So we need to gather that data. So in their names, and I suggest that you go to our website. Any of you have information about these, is to get data. We need to talk about it. Number two is to really lift up and honor those sisters, those innocent bystanders that have lost their lives in these incidents. So the other piece is a place for families and community members to put in pictures to talk about legacy. The third thing is it really forces us to talk to within our own communities, to say we cannot be silent anymore, because this is something that is affecting our community at every level. It's affecting men, it's affecting women, it's affecting families. So I would suggest as one thing to do is to go on, for those of you who know of specific circumstances, to go on in their names to fill out that data form. We have 2 events coming up. So we have an event on August 12th, which is to bring us together spiritually. These past 8 weeks have been really difficult for survivors. They have been triggering for staff members. They have been hard for the whole community. So one is that we are bringing folks together to pray, to talk, to look for some spiritual peace as we go on in this journey. And that is August 12th. That is a Zoom gathering. We have really amazing speakers.
Is this on a Facebook page?
Yes, Sister Mona. I'm sure that Sister Mona, who's much better than I am, can pull that up. And then we have a second event on October 13th, which is the first Friday of Domestic Violence Month. And we are looking for a couple of different things. So one is we're asking all Muslims to wear purple hijab, purple something, to go into their masjids and to demand conversations around domestic violence in every single masjid across the United States and Canada, because we are now partnering with 6 organizations in Canada as well. So that we're asking for that. We are also in the process of creating a national Muslim teach-in that evening, so that we can begin to talk about prevention. We can talk about, this stigma of divorce, which is not, again, this is not part of Islam. We were given the gift of peaceful parting. The idea that it is shameful and that it is worse than anything else is cultural. That is not Islamic. So we need to talk about that. We need to talk about our Prophet, peace be upon him, as an example. We need to really dig deep in education. So we have those 2. We have the ongoing campaign of In Their Names, which will be ongoing because, unfortunately, as we've learned in these past 8 weeks, there will continue to be cases, and we need to document them. There is no national list of
let me say this. One of the
victims of domestic violence.
And I'm watching, sitting from afar, people stumble all over themselves trying to be the first to do something. You have ISPU sitting there. It's a research organization. Mm-hmm. Why are you all trying to do something when they could very easily do it for you with their huge databases? I'm just saying, we're not marshaling our resources. We want, my organization does X, Y, and Z, and but my organization does P, Q, and R. When we have organizations specialized to do some of the things that we need. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me give you an example. So for me as an agency, when I draw the numbers, all right, so if I need to put these numbers into perspective, I go to ISPU, I do go to Peaceful Family Projects. Now, you also have to realize that as someone who is in the direct services, all right, people who create these sources, these numbers, and the data, they also have to connect with direct service people in order to get the correct data. Exactly. Not that anyone is wrong. However, I'm being very honest. I look at both the datas, but to me, as a direct service agency, PFP has more relevant data for my use. I have given this feedback to ISPU that when you create a
Gotta do
survey,
both. Gotta
when
do
you create a survey, you have to get hold of direct service people. So one example, when Dr. Berte and I were working on In Their Name, the first level of form, when I, as a direct service agency, was filling out, ask her, the first thing I said was, if I am a family of a victim, this is very triggering for me. These questions are very triggering. I will not go to page 2. I will not fill out the survey. You cannot do that. So the partnership between TMWF and PFP is because she consults with what is the right language, what numbers is it important for you to work in this field. Not there is, I'm not minimizing ISPU, amazing, amazing, amazing work, but for me that is very highly intellectual research. If I'm
But
putting
you
in a
gotta
research
tell
paper,
them, you
I
gotta
will go to them. But
that and force them to do what you need to have done. I'm going to take another quick minute break, and I want to come back because I don't think the African American community knows about any of this.
Mhm.
And I got to figure out because they've been left out of the equation, kind of, sort of, all the way around, and that's another issue. But um, but I'm going to make sure they know about this. Let's take a minute break and come back to some more. We're laying a foundation, and perhaps next week or the week after, whenever you ladies are available, I want to continue this conversation. I am myself traumatized, and I got to call Dr. Denise up to make an appointment um, by the number. And what effect perhaps the pandemic has had in all of this. What's going on? I'm going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute or so. This is Professor Aminah Al-deen with Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV. And we're talking about domestic violence and also some of the ways that you can put your 2 cents in. Thank you. We'll be right back. Salam, this is Professor Aminah Al-deen with Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV. And we're tackling, as a start, the issue of domestic violence and suicide when there's a suicide after a horrific event, and its increasing occurrence. I have with me today Dr. Denise Berte, who has given us, and she is a busy, oh, well, all these ladies are busy, these busy ladies that I got to let go soon. So we are talking with Dr. Denise, with Mona Kafeel and Nadiah Mohajir, and we're trying to narrow down, I guess one could say, some parameters. Um, First of all, do any of you belong to the Muslim Mental Health Organization? You do?
Mhm.
Denise is shaking. I'm on the board. I haven't seen your name.
Oh,
I'm going to make sure it's back there, and I'm going to put all the. So when y'all see this email come, say, why did Aminah do this? I don't really even know her, but I'm doing it to you all. I think all of the venues that we can use, and Denise, I want all of that information. I'm going to put it on some of the African American Muslim sites and stuff because those women do too. Um, hmm. What do you think the pandemic did?
Sped up a lot of issues. It has sped up.
Made people have to be in the same space that perhaps could get some rest from each other. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there were women who were deciding not to leave the abusive situation and do something about it while staying at home. And they were getting counseling. Now, with the abuser in the home, they're either sitting, driving around and getting counseling or not getting counseling at all. That's one of hundreds of examples that I can share.
Wow. I didn't think of that one. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean,
think
go ahead. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I'm same question.
Oh, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think it made accessing therapy a lot harder. It made accessing community a lot harder, right? Like if you are immersed in a masjid community or a community center sort of community, now all of a sudden you don't have access to that community and away from your potential abuser. I also think it exacerbated a lot of economic insecurity as well. Many people lost their jobs. If the woman was financially dependent on the her partner that was abusing her, then and they lost their job, then the stress kind of increased in the home. And financial insecurity just became even more profound. And one of the biggest reasons that people do not leave their partners is financial insecurity, and because they don't have the money to leave, or they don't have the sustainability, they don't have the money to sustain a life without their partner. And if they have
Now, wait a
children,
minute. What you're telling me is that women get married without having any level of self-sufficiency?
no, not always, not always. It depends on the family, and it depends on the woman, and what their arrangements are. I'll also share this, that I have like worked with a lot of women leaving abusive marriages that are wealthy, like a lot of wealthy women
Mhm.
leaving abusive marriages, and their husbands have ruined their credit, have taken all of their
Why
money.
did they let him do that?
Well, first of all, we live in a country, US law. A lot of the states are no fault states. So everything is cut 50-50. So any wealth that a woman may have entered her marriage with, now
Mhm.
she's actually going to have to give half of it to her partner, right? And that in of itself is financially
I
devastating.
changed my name, but anyway,
That
during the pandemic, a group of us got together and we wrote a book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Half of Faith.
I love it.
Yeah, we worked. I was so distressed by the stuff that was going on. I'm saying, whoa, 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 wait a minute, wait a minute. What is going on here? And why can't people stop it? But then I realized that agency for many women is a foreign word. They just don't have the get up and know about finances. They also don't, what you don't know, you can't ask about, even how your house is run, where the what bills are paid, what bills are not paid. This is okay. Pandemic, Denise.
pandemic. So I think a couple of things. One is not only were women and separated from community and the things that we've heard, but also the masjids were closed, right? So any kind of, and families were separated from each other. So that normalizing that support that both perpetrators and potential victims might have was taken away. I think the other thing is that we do need to talk about gun violence. So we know that gun ownership went up during the pandemic. We know that gun violence went up during the pandemic. We know that in these 8 weeks, all of the incidents but one had gun violence as part of it. And we need to look at that as well, because becoming angry and all of these other things do not lead to homicide if you do not have a weapon that can kill someone in your house and do it that quickly that you can't think about it, that you don't have that moment of, I should stop.
That's right.
And that's where we see this. The idea of suicide was that in all of these cases, it was homicide suicide. That the intimate partner was killed, and then the perpetrator then killed themselves, or in the last case.
That is such an easy way out of being responsible. Right? And
also, unfortunately, legally puts us in a very difficult place, because then there's nothing to investigate, theoretically, right? Yeah. So it's a clean ending, and that's problematic as well, because we're not looking at
why are we staying with these toxic communities? If the community has an imam who needs to be under Denise or somebody else's care, why are we in his community?
I think so I'll answer quickly, and then I'll let my colleagues speak. So I think there's a couple of things. One is that our imams are not monitored and certified. And this is a problem that we know about.
Why are we, if they're not monitored and their behinds are not certified, why are we in their community? We wouldn't go to an unmonitored, uncertified doctor. Why are we in that community?
Well, and that's a national question, right? We need to come up with a structure that everyone agrees to, which is difficult in itself. That would monitor and certify.
You go the other way. You don't go to it.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If I know that there's a problematic imam, I will not attend that mosque. I will not attend their lectures, etc. But the community pressure is a lot, and I think a whole PhD dissertation can be, written on how power and privilege and credibility move in our communities, and whose voice is credible and whose voice is not. So if I, as a woman, stood up and said that imam is problematic, therefore I'm not going to that mosque, or I'm not going to that, I will be the one who is blamed more than likely. Then
what do you care if it saves?
I mean, that group down there. But it depends on who's following my voice versus his voice. If he comes in and says no, but
it doesn't. No, we're each individually accountable for what we support and what we don't. Down there in Texas, it's the only thing I do out of Texas, because it's crazy. There is a third space, right? What's the name of it? Muslim space. You know it?
I know it.
And my husband and I participate all the time, because these young people seem to have a little bit of sense. And on top of that, I love game night. But nevertheless, we lend our tacit support when we continue. Why are we, who want to be upright and responsible and accountable, worrying about what those who are not have to say?
I'm not.
So when you speak about Texas, I tell you that when we started this organization, then we would go out and do outreach with all the imams. And first thing, the people at my agency, they were listening to these imams. They would throw the brochure and say, Wallahi, sisters, you are breaking the family. There is no such thing as domestic violence within Muslim community. Why are you doing this? And they would turn us away. And fast forward, when there is a surge of women going to them and getting help from them, they realize that, okay, this is not the answer. So it has taken us, we've chipped at it. It has taken us so many years. So initially, I would say in 2012 and 2013, we went around all the mosques in the area and we had all the imams sign zero tolerance in their mosque regarding domestic violence, and they would call TMWF immediately. They would not try to handle it because this is beyond their scope. So that has happened. And now, coming into this month, with the help of PFP, what we are trying to do is come up with a mandatory annual imam training within Dallas Fort Worth imams. We are
Oh, it
putting.
needs to be further than Dallas Fort Worth. Ladies, I'm going to ask one thing of you, and that is that can each of you write me 2 questions? Can I get you back? I'm not letting go. You have further traumatized me today, and I'm dumping the trauma. I'm going to make an appointment with Dr. Denise. This is Professor Aminah Al-deen. I have had a much too short conversation with Dr. Denise Berte, Mona Kafeel, and Nadiah Mohajir, whom I sincerely hope to have back soon with their direction to me as to what we need to discuss. Ladies, thank you more than you'll ever know.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Shukran. Ma salam.
Assalamu alaikum.